Good morning to you, and thank you so much for finding time to be with us. I apologize, we had started the show a bit earlier, but we suffered a bit of a technical hitch, but no worries, we're back and we shall pick it from where we had left. And I was just going through the Daily Nation headline. The main headline is the scramble for hustler cakes. I'll not read through the rest of the stories. And then we turn our attention to the Star newspaper. Ruto sends 100 to oversee transition. Kenya to lead main team together with Justin Muturi, Davis Chirchir and Ababu Namwamba. The story is 4 and 5. And the main pictorial there is handover committee, KDF prepare for power transfer. That is what we have. Kalonzo, Wetangula, Marende, front runners in race for speaker. That story is on page 6. Out of ammo, why Raila may not hang up his boots just yet. Azimio chief Raila Odinga, 77, lost to President-elect William Ruto in his fifth stab that many believe ends his political career. But the former Prime Minister, who has been described as an enigma of the Kenyan politics, may not retire from active politics just yet, while it may not be clear if he will make the sixth attempt at the country's top seat in 2027 general election. Raila has hinted at not hanging up his political boots anytime soon. That story is on page 8. I'm not looking for a job in Ruto cabinet, says Magoha. Education CS George Magoha has said he has no intention to continue serving in the docket under the incoming regime. The CS said his continued commitment to supervise CBC classrooms across the country should not be construed to mean he's angling to be retained in the docket under the Kenya Kwanza administration. I'm not looking for a job. You can take that to the bank, Magoha said. That story is on page 10. IBC should mend its public image. That story is on page 16, and I'm sure that is what Kenyans are thinking. A lot of Kenyans, because that has been really dented with the events and how they unfolded. Okay, so the Standard newspaper, the main headline, inside Uhuru's government, a president-elect faces a Herculean task of making a clean break from an outgoing administration, which was part of and crafting a quality cabinet with competing regional and gender interests, as well as rewarding allies who stuck with him in the face of intense pressures. We take a sneak preview into William Ruto's administration. The story is on page 4. Uhuru's puzzling cold reception to deputies win. The story is on page 2. Why is it puzzling? I don't know if you expected anything different. We've seen how the relationship has been, so I'm not really puzzled. Uhuru was just being consistent, okay? Uber's bid to slam brakes on new rules. That story is on page 28. New UK leader Truss takes over. That is on the World Stories on page 32. Kenyans to star in Zurich, DL. That story is on page 45. Rachel Ruto, from village girl to first lady. Mrs. Ruto, who has made prayer and fasting her lifestyle, takes over as State House from First Lady Margaret Kenyatta. That story is on page 3. Azimio bigwigs stare at life in the cold. That is on page 22. And that is what we have on the leading newspapers in the country. Let me just take us through some of the regional newspapers. And we start with the Daily Monitor from Uganda. Parents set to pay for milk at school. Government says management bodies of schools are expected to meet with already constrained parents to decide how much they would pay for new compulsory milk feeding programs that seeks to improve learners' health. So if you are going to make milk compulsory in school, maybe the government should provide that milk. Why are you making it compulsory and then you're forcing parents to pay? Education Minister Janet Museveni, what's happening there? So now parents are said to pay for that milk. Okay. The New Vision from Uganda as well. Government rights to schools over fees. Students stranded, parents cry out as schools hike fees. That story is on page 5-6 on the New Vision. Newsday from Zimbabwe. Thousands flee economic mess. At the Daily News from Zimbabwe as well. Sinzimba confirms no VIPs in CCC. says party positions will only come after they hold Congress. The Citizen from Tanzania, retired CJ's Kenya report, former Chief Justice Mohamed Chande Othman lauds Kenya's judicial process, citing the role of its constitution in guiding elections, adding that Tanzania should borrow a leaf on how the neighboring country allows presidential results to be challenged in court. Yes, indeed, because we know the results in presidential results in Tanzania. I think even other results, you can't really challenge the outcome in any court in Tanzania. So the former retired Chief Justice in Tanzania, former Chief Justice Mohamed Chande, is saying that perhaps Tanzania should borrow that, even as it seeks to continue building on its democracy. I know there were calls for reviewing the constitution that were being led by the opposition, and President Samia Suluhu, I think she said that is something that the country might consider, but after the coming elections. So she does not want any disturbance right now. Remember, she took over from John Pombe Magufuli after just a few months of serving as after he was re-elected as the president. So she's almost having a whole term, and she said after perhaps the first term, after the elections, then the government might consider the process of constitutional review. I guess she assumes that she might be re-elected. I don't know. NHIF flags fraud, wants regulatory body. All right, that story is on page 5 of the Citizen in Tanzania. And then census lives up to expectations. Yes, Tanzanians had their census done last month, and they have met the expectation or whatever it is that was set there. The Guardian from the UK, into the storm, a truce vows to solve cost of living crisis. And I'm sure the Britons are waiting, because we know right now they're grappling with a lot of issues, and not just in British, but also across the world. The high prices of fuel, the high cost of living, and now they don't even have enough gas, and the winter is just around the corner because they cut ties with Russia, who is the main supplier of, gas across Europe. And so that is a problem. So she's just, inheriting a government that really is in a firefighting mode, and so Britons are waiting to see if at all she will solve some of these issues, especially as far as cost of living is concerned. We can ride out the storm. That is the main headline on the Daily Telegraph. The Nation from Nigeria. ASUU government raises 14-man panel to resolve naughty issues. 23.5% pay rise for teachers likely, and return to classroom. Bishops urges teachers. So we know that the university lecturers and dons there have been on strike since February this year, and schools, higher learning institutions have been closed, and the government has said they did all they could, but it doesn't look like they've done enough, And so it has been a stalemate, so they're working on it, I guess. The Guardian from Nigeria. Federal government to revisit no work, no pay as VCs push to end strike, the same strike we've talked about. Okay, so that's what's... okay, very well. So that is what we have on the newspapers from Kenya, and indeed from across the continent. So now let me bring you up to date with some of the news making headlines from across the continent. We start with Nigeria, and Polish President Andrzej Duda is in Nigeria as he begins a 3-day visit to Africa. The impact of the war in Ukraine and migration are some of the issues he is expected to raise. The Polish president is also expected to address the worsening global food and energy crisis, which he's expected to say has been fueled by Kremlin's invasion in Ukraine. Officials say the visit will focus on fostering strong economic and security ties. Mr. Duda held talks with President Muhammadu Buhari in the capital Abuja. According to local media, a deal on agriculture was signed. We head over to South Africa, and former South Africa's President Jacob Zuma has launched a private prosecution against the senior state prosecutor, Billy Downer, as well as a journalist. This is in connection to a media house, News 24, publishing information related to Mr. Zuma's medical condition last year. Mr. Downer is the lead prosecutor in the corruption case against the former president related to the purchase of arms for South Africa. Mr. Zuma contends that the publication of his medical records violated sections of the law. The publication of his medical condition followed his release on medical parole after he was imprisoned July last year. The National Prosecuting Authority gave the former president the green light to pursue the private prosecution against Mr. Downer in June after it declined to prosecute him for allegedly leaking Mr. Zuma's medical reports to the media. We go to Ethiopia, and the UN has said it does not know the whereabouts of hundreds of Ethiopian former peacekeepers. They had sought asylum in neighboring Sudan after refusing to return home at the end of their mission. Tens of thousands of ethnic Tigrayans have crossed to the border to seek refuge in neighboring Sudan since the civil war broke out in November 2020. Now, the UN's refugee agency, UNHCR, said that earlier this year they received credible reports that there were efforts to recruit soldiers, sometimes forcefully, among those refugees. The UNHCR says it relayed its strong concerns to the Sudanese authorities, and there were improvements. Among those seeking refugee were 650 Ethiopian former peacekeepers, mostly of Tigrayan ethnicity. They refused to return home for fear of persecution. Nearly 250 of them were granted refugee status, but the UNHCR told the BBC that it does not have any information on the rest. And we head over to Burundi. Speculation continues in Burundi about who President Evariste Ndayishimiye was referring to after he warned that powerful people in his government were planning a coup. In remarks last week, before a ruling party meeting in the economic capital Bujumbura, Mr. Ndayishimiye cautioned that he would defeat any plot against him. No official announcement followed his remarks, and it is not clear who among the high-ranking officials he was referring to. Burundians online have filled the information gap with speculation, even naming the people they think the president was speaking about. Mr. Ndayishimiye became president in 2020 after his predecessor, Pierre Nkurunziza, who had governed the country for 15 years, died in office. Since independence in 1962, Burundi has had 4 successful coups. Several have been foiled and 1 presidential assassination. A failed coup in 2015 plunged the country into deadly unrest. Go to Zambia, and President Hakainde Hichilema is against laws that impinge on the freedoms enjoyed by citizens, his spokesperson has said. The comment follows the arrest of a critic for allegedly defaming the head of state. Neither does the president influence the arrest of his critics, nor how the law should be applied. Spokesperson Anthony Blair has added. Opposition politician Sean Tembo was arrested last Thursday after the alleged defamation that he still remains in custody. A video of Mr. Tembo being taken to hospital on Monday for a brief visit before being returned to police custody has been shared online. We go to South Sudan, and the United Nations said on Tuesday that some 173 civilians have been killed and 37 abducted in 4 months of fighting in South Sudan between forces loyal to President Salva Kiir and Vice President Riek Machar, with many cases of sexual violence also reported. The fighting took place between February and May in Koch, Leah, and Mayandit counties, located about 400 kilometers north of the capital, Juba, in Unity State, a stronghold of the pro-Machar SPLA-IO forces. Some of the abductees suffered sexual violence, including girls as young as 8 years old, the UN added. A 9-year-old girl died after being gang raped. That is very disturbing. According to UNIMIS, which says it has conducted 131 cases of rape and gang rape, the violence has also caused an estimated 44,000 people to flee their villages. While factions on both sides are involved in the violence, government forces and militias loyal to President Salva Kiir are the main perpetrators of human rights violations and abuses, according to the UN, citing premeditated attacks. The UN and the international community regularly accuse South Sudanese leaders of maintaining a status quo, fomenting violence, suppressing political freedoms, and misappropriating public funds. You know, I have so much to say about that story, but let's first finish the rest of the news from across Africa, and we go to Egypt. And Egyptian's foreign minister withdrew Tuesday from Arab League session chaired by the chief of diplomat of one of Libya's two rival governments. The move was an apparent protest against her representing Libya at the Pan-Arab Summit. Egypt supports her administration's rival. The seats of the Egyptian delegation were seen empty as Najla Mongoush, the foreign minister of the Tripoli-based administration, was addressing a meeting for the Arab foreign ministers in Cairo. Egyptian Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry left the meeting room in the Arab League headquarters when Mongoush took her seat to chair the meeting. Egypt has argued the mandate of the Tripoli-based government of Prime Minister Abdelhamid Deiba has ended after Libya's East-based parliament appointed a rival premier earlier this year. Libya's current political stalemate grew out of failure to hold elections in December and Deiba's refusal to step down. He led the transitional government. In response, the country's East-based parliament appointed a rival Prime Minister, Fathi Bashagha, who has for months sought to install his government in Tripoli. Earlier this month, the parliament that appointed him cancelled its session after it said members were prevented from leaving the capital Tripoli, which is controlled by its rivals. The divisions have contributed to fresh fighting in the war-torn country. And then we head over to Guinea. A mission from the International Criminal Court arrived in Conakry on Monday evening to assess the state of preparations for the trial of the alleged perpetrators of the massacre of opponents at the Conakry Stadium on September 28th, 2009. On that day, soldiers killed at least 157 people and raped 109 women in the stadium, where thousands of opponents to the presidential candidacy of junta leader Musa Camara were gathered, according to a UN Commission of Inquiry. The judicial investigations was completed in December 2017, with a dozen defendants referred to court, including Mr. Camara. The trial is yet to be held despite multiple commitments from the authorities in Conakry, particularly under the regime of former President Alpha Conde, who was overthrown by a military coup a year ago. The head of junta, Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, has instructed his justice minister to do everything possible to ensure that the trial opens before the 13th anniversary date, but no date has been given yet. And we look at something else from Somalia. The United Nations is calling for a significant and rapid scale-up of humanitarian assistance to prevent a famine in Somalia that could result in a devastating loss of life. The latest UN Food and Nutritional Analysis released on Monday warns more than 1 million people in Bay region in south-central Somalia are on the verge of famine. That is the third drought facing Somalia in decade. UNICEF Somalia representative Wafa Said says repercussions from the current drought will be disastrous if international support is not significant and immediate. The UN Children's Fund says malnutrition has reached crisis levels. It says 1.5 million children, nearly half of the under 5 population, are acutely malnourished. It warns that some 385,000 children suffered from severe acute malnutrition are at a risk of death without special nutrition treatment. He was speaking in the Somali capital Mogadishu. Said said that about 730 children are reported to have died in food and nutrition centers across the country, and she added that the number is probably higher because many deaths go unreported. And then we end our news this morning from Nigeria. Many gas stations were shut on Tuesday, leading to lengthy queues by motorists at the few outlets that had the commodity in Abuja and neighboring states. The petrol scarcity and its attendant queues on Tuesday were due to the warning strike embarked by the Suleja Depot branch of the Independent Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria. The oil marketers commenced the three-day warning strike on Monday and stopped their members from lifting petrol from the depot to more than 5 states in the north, including Abuja, a development that caused a scarcity on Tuesday. The two ever-busy filling station, Conoil and Total, located right in front of the headquarters of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, shut their doors to the customers. Members of the union commenced the strike on Monday in protest against the continued indebtedness of the federal government to oil marketers with respect to the repayment of fuel transportation cost, otherwise called bridging claims. And that is the latest news from across the continent of Africa. And that last story sounds like what we were going through in the country, I think around April, around end of March, April there. It sounds like the same thing that was happening. The marketers, the oil marketers of the government are not agreeing on the subsidies, and so there was scarcity of gas in the country, or petrol as we call it, and it became a real nightmare. It became a real nightmare. So it appears that is the same thing that is happening. So alarm bells there on Somalia. There's not enough food, and the country is staring at the worst famine ever, and kids are dying. Kids are dying. That is according to the United Nations, and so I think something must be done very, very soon. All right, let's look at the story on Egypt. They were meeting, the Arab League was meeting yesterday, and there was a representative of Libya in that meeting. It was a pan-Arab summit, and Egypt did not like that this person was sent to represent Tripoli. She was sent by the government right now that is in Tripoli, but elections have not yet been had. I think it was appointed because they're set to have the elections in December, which I really doubt will happen because of the situation that we have in Libya. I don't think it is. It can support a proper election as things stand in Libya. The place is in chaos, for heaven's sake. So they keep saying elections will happen in Libya in December. Maybe the just a few people who have been appointed maybe will just vote to elect who will be the leader of the country. So she showed up. She showed up in this Arab League, Arab summit, and Egypt's foreign minister withdrew. He left the room because he said he can't be part of that. This lady was known as Najla, all right, Mukush, and the foreign minister of the Tripoli-based administration. She was the one who was supposed to be addressing a meeting and perhaps to give them an update on what has been happening in Libya. Because I've seen this Arab summit or Arab League. A lot of times they really give their opinions on things that they shouldn't. I saw them during that time. Kenya's case with Somalia was going on at the International Court of Justice at The Hague, and they had a lot to say about what was happening, and I think they were warning Kenya about I don't know what. And okay, fine. The ICJ made its ruling last year. Nothing has changed, I believe. Otherwise, we would have had any updates about that, the maritime dispute, remember? And the Arab League had so much to say, and I've seen them also, especially in a country involving perhaps one of their members and another country who is a non-member. So they usually just come in, and of course they take sides, which I find to be interesting, okay? Because the problem with Somalia, that was a problem between Kenya and Somalia, and it's still a problem because it has not been solved. As much as the ICJ made its ruling in the last year, but things have not changed in the Indian Ocean. I don't think Somalia government has gone there and deployed its army there or anything like that. So I don't think anything has changed. But that is a problem between two countries. So now I see how the asserting themselves also, and in other areas. So my question has been, the issue in Libya, because Libya is one of their members, why haven't they bothered to solve this problem? Why haven't they bothered to offer solution to Libya, to offer solution to Yemen, offer solution to Syria? Because I think those countries that are their members really could deserve a bit of a help and some solution right now, because they're going through very tough times and the conflicts that have existed there. Okay? But they never want to solve those issues. They never even are open to receiving refugees from this country who are their members in this Arab Summit or League. They don't. Ask yourself, why are the people who are fleeing Syria, the refugees, why are they insisting on going to Europe and other places? Why do we have so many of them in Germany, for instance, and not in these other wealthy Arab countries? So it's very interesting how they pick and choose on which matters they want to get involved in, especially when an issue has to do with one of the members and another one who is a non-member. So I've always wondered, but you look at some of the problems that exist within the member states of that league, that this Arab League really never bother to sort out. So, so they were meeting yesterday, and Egypt was not happy, as I've told. I think we talked about this yesterday, so I'll not get into so much of it. I told you that Egypt is really involved. It has some interest, and a lot of other countries, in what is happening in Libya. And they have their own preference as far as the leadership there is concerned, because of whatever reason. And so, a lot of foreign meddling there. And so this the Prime Minister the Foreign Affairs Minister walked out yesterday when the delegation from Libya sat there, and she was about to take the stage. So the Egyptian Foreign Minister Sami Shukri left the room, and he said they can't tolerate that person speaking, because they believe that the government she's having now, which is in Tripoli, is not legitimate. Okay, so there's a report that was given or released on Tuesday, that was yesterday, on South Sudan. There you go again. And I think throughout the shows that we've been doing, I've been giving you an update about these communal fightings that we've seen happening. But I think the most disturbing of this is the manner in which some of these atrocities are being committed. Now, the fightings, this report is based on the fightings that took place between February and May in Koch, in Lear, and Mayendit counties, which are located about 400 kilometers north of the capital, Juba, in Unity State. And they are a stronghold of Pro-Machar SPLA-IO forces. So according to this report, some of the abductees suffered sexual violence, including girls as young as 8 years old. Can you imagine? And there's a 9-year-old, particularly, who died after being gang raped. How do you do that? But I think I've told you here before, according to reports that were coming during that time, some of these soldiers, they use rape as a means to reward themselves after they've gone and they feel they've conquered or they have won against a community. So they come and they use rape as a means to reward themselves. Quite twisted. Even just to think about it just makes me cringe. Makes me very uncomfortable even to talk about it. So you can imagine grown men raping a 9-year-old girl, gang raping a 9-year-old girl. It's sick. It is sick. So according to this report, and according to UNIMIS, which says it has documented 131 cases of rape and gang rape, The violence also caused an estimated 44,000 people to flee their villages. While factions of both sides are involved in the violence, government forces and militias loyal to President Salva Kiir are the main perpetrators. And I think this is something I read here a couple of months ago, and we didn't have more details of this, but this is according to a United Nations report. And they're saying the government forces, the main perpetrators are the government forces, all right, allied to President Salva Kiir. The government forces who are supposed to be protecting the people. The government forces who are supposed to be protecting that 9-year-old girl are the ones who went and gang raped this girl. The government forces who are supposed to protect their lives are the ones who went and killed. Do you understand how, I almost used a bad word, but do you understand how bad this is there in South Sudan? It's really not okay. It's really not okay. And now if the government forces and militias loyal to President Salva Kiir were the main perpetrators, of course, even the other side, we did have perpetrators. Okay, even the other side, they bear some level of responsibility. Now, these are the forces that I guess are supposed to be unified. These are the forces that are supposed to be protecting the people and the country of South Sudan. These are the same forces that are supposed to be restoring and, law and order. The same forces that are committing these levels of human rights abuses. Then I'm worried for South Sudan. I'm really worried for that country. This is not okay. And of course, the UN and the international community has regularly accused South Sudan, and I'll put myself in that group, of South Sudanese leaders of maintaining status quo. I think we've said this over and over. It's a broken record now. I'll not even go into the details of it. It is a broken record because they are really keen on maintaining a status quo. And they foment violence to protect their interests at whatever means necessary, and they suppress political freedoms, and they also misappropriate public funds. And then you hear, oh, we don't have money to implement the aspects of the revitalized peace agreement. Well, a lot of this money is just being used in ways that are not good. So that is the problem that we are dealing with there in South Sudan. I think this report, the people responsible, I think, must be brought to book. But now if the people responsible, the main perpetrators of this are government forces and government militias, I told you, and I've told you here several times before, that we do have the government forces, like I can't say disciplined forces, because what we have in South Sudan, maybe the unified forces now will come with that level of discipline that we see being exhibited across, disciplined forces around the world. But the ones we had don't have that. So apart from having the forces that wear the official uniform of the forces, the government also has its own militia, and every side has its own militia. It's not just the side of Salva Kiir. It's across board. These are atrocities and things that are committed across board. Riek Machar also has his forces and also has militias to back that forces, and the other ones. So that is the situation as far as the security or lack thereof of it in South Sudan. That is how it is. And so the government forces and also the militias loyal to president are the ones who are perpetrating this. So perhaps where I'd like to understand, now that we have the unified forces and they will be taking over the security apparatus in that country, and I'm just hoping that things will change, because this is something that happened between February and May. This is a report of the killings that we saw go on, the communal fightings that we saw go on in Koch, Leah, and Mayan Date. So hopefully things will change now with the unified forces. But what I'd like to know is what will happen to these militias that are loyal to President Salva Kiir, that are loyal to Dr. Riek Machar, that are loyal to Cirillo, that are loyal to the other parties. What will happen to them? Will they undergo the same training? Will they lay down their arms? What will happen? Because as much as we're being told that unified forces have graduated, and we saw they graduated, and I'm really happy that that really happened, but who is addressing the issue of these militia forces who are also have been acting in support of these other forces? What will happen to these militia groups? Do they have some training for them? How will they transit? Because that's all they know. How will the government take care of them after this? What will be the programs that perhaps they will be involved in so that they find something else to do, and they let the unified forces, who are trained forces, to actually take control of the security of South Sudan? Because as long as we still have these militias that are being supported and sponsored and equipped by these different factions, then the issue of insecurity has not been solved in South Sudan. We will have the unified forces, which is good. We will just have ticked one of the recommendations in the Revitalized Peace Agreement of 2018. But in actual sense, we will not have solved the problem of insecurity if this militia's issue is not really addressed. And I think this report should be an eye-opener of the work that still remains to be done in South Sudan, even as they look to, implement some of those other aspects of the revitalized peace, and also just move on as a country. These are matters that they must address if really they can find some good level of stability, and also peace there in South Sudan. Okay, so the issue of Ethiopia and how some refugees who are seeking refuge in Sudan, somehow they have disappeared. And I'll not talk so much about that because I'll be having another show later on at 3 p.m. East African time to look at that. So perhaps I'll just leave that there. Also another worrying story. And so we'll look at that later. So this story of a former South African president, even as I conclude the show, South African President Jacob Zuma now is seeking to, or launching a private prosecution. Remember, he still has an active case process. Remember, he was taken to jail for a contempt of court sometimes back last year, and then he couldn't serve the whole time that he was given because he fell sick while he was in jail, so he had to be removed and go and seek some other medical cover. As much as I do understand what might have necessitated the court to want to take him to jail, which he did, I don't know if it was really necessary, but I guess the court was just trying to send a message. If you can't act with impunity like that, Mr. Jacob Zuma, we know you're the former president, but if you're called to testify or if you're called to appear in the court, then you're supposed to go there. Remember, he's been having a very long case as far as corruption is concerned. Jacob Zuma is a very corrupt man, and there's another scandal that dates back to many years ago with the Gupta family on arms deals and all that. It's a long story I'll not get into. And Zuma had refused to go and appear in that case. And so the court said, oh, well, you think you'll just do what you want? Well, South Africa is a country that has laws, and everybody, whether you're former heads of state or not, must obey that. And so they charged him with contempt of court, and he went to jail, fell sick. Now, there is a prosecutor that... a senior state prosecutor, Billy Downer, that is the person, as well as another journalist. These two apparently leaked a private information about his medical notes or condition to the public. So on one hand, you're wondering, Zuma, really, you're taking someone to court while you still have an active court. But on the other hand, I think it is within his rights. Medical reports are private. That is just how it is. So for these two to have leaked this to the public, I don't think it was necessary. And so he's saying he's going to sue them. Mr. Zuma contends that the publication of his medical records violated sections of the law. The publication of his medical condition followed his release on medical parole after he was imprisoned in July last year. So this state prosecutor and this journalist, I guess state prosecutor is the one who provided the journalist with the information, I suppose, and the journalist published, and they said this really violated his right to privacy, as far as his medical report is concerned. And the National Prosecuting Authority gave the former president the green light to pursue the private prosecution against Mr. Downer in June, after it declined to prosecute him for allegedly leaking Mr. Zuma's medical reports to the media. So I think it is within his rights, and he should pursue this because the law allows him to do just that. I want to thank you so much for your time this morning. I'll see you back here later on at 3 p.m. East African time with more stories from across the continent of Africa. And also we shall be looking at the current situation as far as the conflict in Ethiopia that started in November 2021 and has continued, and nothing much has changed. So we shall look at that. What is the latest? A very disturbing event, because for some moment there was a cessation of hostilities, and for the last, I think, 2 weeks or so, that has resumed. So what is a new trigger of the current spark that has seen a renewed violence there in Ethiopia? So join me at 3 p.m. East African time. We shall be looking at more of that story. My name is Miriam Ogutu. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Good Morning Africa. Have yourselves a good day. Bye-bye.